And make an introduction. Good morning. This is the Kubernetes community meeting, or good local time to you for those of you not on the West Coast. It is Thursday, July 28th, and this morning we have a demo from Zach Hill at Anchor. Do we say the E? Do we not say the E?
Anchor is the pronunciation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So from Anchor, and then we'll have a few SIG updates and see what other agenda items find us through the course of the community meeting today. So Zach, please give us an introduction to Anchor and go ahead and give us your demo.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let me get the screen sharing. So yeah, I appreciate everybody's time and letting me talk with you guys for sure. This is a great opportunity. We're really happy to kind of engage with the Kubernetes community and see all the great things that have been happening with Kubernetes. So let me get the slides up. I've got like 2 or 3 kind of slides, like a quick overview of kind of what is Anchor, then we'll do a kind of quick demo of kind of show what it is and how it works and why it kind of it's of interest to the Kubernetes community. And we'll try to keep it within time. Let me share the screen here. So I will start. With that one. Okay. All right, can we see the screen okay?
Yes.
Are we getting the slide deck, or are we getting something else?
We're getting the slide deck, and you're just about to go to presenter view.
Yes. Okay, so you see the slides right now? We good?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so Anchor is a newcomer. We just started up just a few months ago. And kind of our goal at Anchor is to help kind of make containers really production ready. And by that, I mean helping kind of remove the barriers within organizations and within the tech stack to kind of using containers and orchestration systems like Kubernetes in production. The orchestration space itself, Kubernetes is doing great. It makes deploying applications and really complex stacks really simple and really easy, but they're kind of organizational and other goals or difficulties that arise when you can push code to production so quickly, right? Time is really low. The number of containers kind of flowing through the system can be very high with a mature system, combining a nice CI system and Kubernetes. And so this can create kind of operational challenges for folks that need to know kind of what's flowing through my system, where is it going, and what's actually being put into production that's running on our kind of our edge network location. So Anchor, we built a tool set to kind of give full visibility into that. So our kind of objective is to give as much visibility into what is in the container, what it's doing, where it came from, as possible, and kind of also allow operators, developers, anybody to kind of provide policy around what is an acceptable container, anywhere from kind of the basic security kind of stuff all the way to best practices, right? Like definition, policy around how a Docker file should be constructed for the container builds, kind of interactions between containers in terms of their port exposures, all that kind of stuff. So really, Anchor is kind of a data-driven approach to providing visibility into your container images themselves. So we're not an orchestration system or anything like that. We're not a monitoring system in that sense. It's not a system that aims to kind of give you runtimes. It's a static analysis system at the moment. Our design goals with all of this is that it's very lightweight, kind of system agnostic. You can use it kind of anywhere and on anything. And you're not tied into like a specific registry implementation or anything like that. And you can use it kind of when and where it makes sense. And you never have to push images anywhere outside of your network that you're not comfortable with, right? So it's very lightweight, and we try to keep it straightforward for integrating with Kubernetes and a number of other things. So one of the things I'd love to get feedback, as a result of this the discussion is kind of interesting further integration opportunities with Kubernetes itself, and where would the community find it useful to have a tool like this in their Kubernetes workflows, and make it easier to use Kubernetes and kind of justify Kubernetes to management or whoever is kind of making decisions about production. And ultimately, this comes down to what we're calling the democratization of certification. So, right, kind of the idea that you can certify images and define exactly what certification means for your organization or your team, and then have kind of automated and fast ways of verifying that and ensuring that things meet those certification requirements. Anywhere from, again, kind of the standard security stuff all the way to more complex and application-driven properties of the images. We believe this must be open and specifically open source. So it's an open source first approach for sure. And we recently released our open source tooling. You can find it on GitHub, and I'll kind of show that a little bit later. But that's the approach we're taking. And to reiterate, what is certification in our context? It's definitely more than just security. That's kind of the table stakes, and that's what a lot of folks are talking about is security with containers. We think that's interesting, but there's a lot of other attributes of containers, and especially with the complexity and the great model that Kubernetes and orchestration systems like Kubernetes provide around kind of the container space, and combining them and defining services that are collections of containers that interact in interesting ways. We have a few key tenets to kind of our approach. Again, open source extensibility, right? From the beginning, we built this assuming that we're not going to even come close to guessing all the kind of things people are going to want to do. So it's built from the beginning to be very extensible. Just add, Python scripts or Bash scripts or whatever you want to kind of do this to help kind of aid in this stuff. Cross-platform, developer focused, and we're definitely data-driven. So a container workflow using Anchor, right? The basic pieces of Anchor, it's an analysis engine. So you kind of, it gets an image, it analyzes it, it learns as much about it as possible, and then you can create gates, and what we're calling gates, which are basically queries with a kind of a pass-fail kind of output, as well as queries. So you kind of build collections of those things, and then you can run them in automated fashions. In an automated fashion with images as they're flowing through the system, so that you can both retain interesting information about containers and about the images, as well as ensuring that certain properties of the image itself are met before it gets rolled out into a deployment. So the basic workflow with Anchor, you're pulling images from public registries. Anchor, we actually have a service that's running in the cloud that's kind of scanning the ecosystem, doing analysis of official registries and their images, as well as things like bug report feeds, CDE feeds, all that kind of stuff, and kind of mining all this stuff and creating a nice database. So next step is then you would sync it down to your local machine. Installing Anchor is really straightforward. It's like a pip install Anchor, or you can get it off GitHub. But it's just a local tool that sets up a database, and then you sync our cloud data down to it, and that's just kind of generic analysis data of the public images. And then you define the policies and queries and stuff that makes sense for you and your team, and then you kind of hook it into your build workflow, right? So developers are coming through building applications, and at the point at which you're actually doing the image build, where the image would actually then be pushed into a registry for deployment with Kubernetes, that's where you would put Anchor. And there's a couple options here. Usually we recommend doing an analysis pass right after you do the build, before you kind of push it through a CI system or through a CI workflow, to kind of get the data about it, and then run your test, your CI, and kind of get the output, whether functionally it's passing the test that you defined, and then do the evaluation at the end. So the gate modules and the policies you've defined can be applied at the end, and this allows you to use the output of those tests as well as using those as inputs to the gates if you want. You could collapse those back down and have a single kind of analyze, evaluate, so you don't waste CI cycles, for instance, on an image that doesn't really pass muster for whatever reason. Kind of examples of our default modules we have right now are Dockerfile checks, package checks, so what packages are in the image, what versions are they, you can blacklist things if you want. We have file SUID checks and CVE checks, and this list is growing. And then if everything passes and it all looks good, then you kind of, you push to your on-prem registry or wherever, if it's GCR or ECR or any of those other registries, and then, that's where the Kubernetes kind of push it through with a rolling update or whatever your update method with Kubernetes is. That's where that would kick. So I'll go through this quickly. You know, aside from the analysis and the gates, which are kind of pass-fail, we also provide modules for doing queries. So you can just ask, you know, whether it's at the time that you do the analysis or any time after that, you can kind of ask these questions about what's in your container. And this is great for systems where you build it and push it away and then it's gone. You don't want to retain a bunch of information about or the actual data for that container outside of the registry itself. But Anchor keeps the database, so you can still ask questions about what's actually in that image without re-pulling it down and all that kind of stuff. So gate checks, again, listing the files, listing the packages, kind of diffing an image from its base image, as well as doing kind of an unpack of the image to kind of see what's actually in it. And I'll walk through this stuff real quick in a minute. So that's basically the overall flow. So let's do the open source, and I'll show the actual system in action here. Let me set up. I need to share a different screen. All right. So can everybody see this terminal? Okay.
Can you make it the text a bit bigger?
Yes.
There we go. Good.
Excellent. Okay, so at this point, I've installed Anchor. I've run it on a bunch of images, you know, for brevity here. Run it on a bunch of images. I actually have images running in Kubernetes. It's a basic application, you know, Mongo and a Node.js app. Really straightforward stuff. And so I kind of want to show what the information Anchor can give you about those images, kind of understanding the insight that it gives. So first, I'll just show a basic report. So this is the basic analysis output you get from Anchor, and I ran it against this Mongo image. So I'm just running through a script here, and you'll see the output. There we go. Yeah, it's a bit delayed at the moment. So that's a basic image report. So you can kind of see the kinds of things that we're able to talk about and able to learn about the container. So the set of tags, you know, the number of packages there. So you see in the counts, we have the number of packages, number of files, number of SUID files, the base diffs, and that column is kind of the differences from the base image. Mongo, it is its own base image, right? It's from scratch. So we can kind of skip over that. And the type of image here is an Anchor base, and that it's something that the Anchor engine is scanning in the ecosystem and providing you analysis when you sync the data down, so you can save cycles there, to reanalyze everything from Docker Hub, for example. So basic analysis report on V1. So I have a web app, we'll call it the V1 web app just to make it kind of straightforward. It's a simple Node.js thing. And we'll run it on this. So there's the image ID. I'm using a GCR for this at the moment. And a similar output, right? But we can see a different set of tags, different sets of counts. And I'll get into this gate status in a moment. So the gate status is actually the output of these gates that are running policy checks against the image, and we'll dig into that in a moment.
So Zach, can I give you one more minute and then a question or two?
Yeah, for sure. Yep. So what does the final gate action stop mean? So stop. Oops, skipped one. So the gate result is this guy. So this is what the gates run, and in this case, it's mostly running CVE checks, which is kind of a straightforward thing to explain, and show everybody kind of understands that. So here's the list of open CVEs that Anchor has found against this image with their different security and the output. So the policy that we have defined in this case says, okay, unknown vulnerabilities or low vulnerabilities are okay. You know, medium. We'll throw a warning for medium vulnerabilities here. We can see that. But you know, high. If there's a high vulnerability, high critical vulnerability in the image, then we should throw a stop. So this stop here is what's giving us that gate check stop. So again, it's an automated way to kind of start pushing images through get to output. But this is really table stakes, right? CVEs are kind of a well-known and understood thing. But we can kind of get more information from these containers as well. So we have this thing, it has vulnerabilities. Let's see what container this Node app is actually based on. So we can run the show command out of our toolbox. And okay, so we have the image ID, repo tags. Oh, so we know it's a Debian distro version 8. We can get some parent IDs and base IDs and stuff. So let's find the parent container. Like what was that container that this was actually based on? And we have a tool in our toolbox called Show Family Tree that kind of shows you the history of it. So what things are this image based on? And so here we can see, here's at the bottom here is the container we have right now, and its parent is based on Node latest, which is an Anchor based image that we've analyzed. So we can kind of learn about that. Okay, so it's Node. So well, what does the report on Node latest say? We'll get that in a second. It's really not this slow, I promise. It's running in a VM, it's not doing well. So this is the basic Anchor report on Node. So, okay, Node latest, here's the tags, makes sense. Packages, files, its gate status is also stopped. So it must, it had some vulnerabilities or it didn't meet the criteria. So are there CVEs that are present in this parent image? So we can actually run, view the gate output on the parent image as well, which is Node.
So we've had a couple of questions as well.
Yeah, sure.
So the first one was, how would this fit in a CI/CD pipeline and Jenkins-like integration or integration with Jenkins?
Yeah, so we've been working on that. We don't actually have a proper plugin yet. That's kind of in progress. We're looking at that. But usually what we do is the part of your Jenkins workflow where we're actually doing the build. So the worker that's actually pulling the Docker file and usually via Git or something. You actually run Anchor there. So you'd run the Docker build and then run Anchor analyze on it at that point. And then at that point, you have the analysis data in the database there. And you can query and go back to it either after the Jenkins run is finished, or move the data out and analyze it somewhere, query it somewhere else.
Okay, we've got two more quick questions, and then I'm going to have to stop you because we're over time. What is the main advantage over CoreOS's Claire project?
Okay, great question. So the main advantage here is that it's a generic approach. We're not focused on just security. So I showed CVEs. That's one of the things that we can do. For example, here I'm actually outputting the Docker file. So we can actually also infer and track Docker files over time. So basically, it gives you visibility into other dimensions other than just the CVEs. So you can apply policies around it, not just is there a CVE, but I can say, I want to make sure that all my images have a certain number of layers. I don't allow more than 20 layers or something, right? Because it's a bad practice. Or don't pull from certain app repositories, that kind of stuff. So it goes beyond just basically, is there a CVE into the actual content and properties of the image itself.
Right. Do you have support for Alpine Linux? Is one of the other questions here.
Yeah, we're working on that. I mean, we can do the analysis for sure. We get all the same information. We're working on getting their CVE feeds and that kind of stuff set up, but we're not quite there yet. We'd love to, talk with folks about doing that and look at kind of. I think a couple other folks have introduced capabilities for that, so we'll be looking into kind of how Alpine is approaching it. From what I've seen, it's basically they track it in their bug system. So getting the actual feeds is not quite as straightforward as just Debian and Ubuntu and those guys. And
lastly, can you post contact information, links to your slides, and a little bit of summary notes into the document for the agenda?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, I've got a bunch of contact info and stuff we can do with Dan for sure.
Awesome. There's also one last question, which is, what does this add over something like OpenSCAP or OpenSCAP? I don't know this tool.
Yeah, so really, this is a container-specific system. So, there's a bunch of tools that are kind of built for analyzing Linux machines, and certainly those are useful. Like we posted a blog about integrating Linus, the Linus scanner with it. But because Anchor is built for containers, we keep things like the provenance, like where did this container come from in terms of what was the parent image. So we can do interesting analysis. I'm not going to have time to get to it, but things like if I rebuild the parent image of a bunch of different developer images, then all they have to do is rebuild. They don't have to change their Docker files at all or update. We just rebuild those and it pulls changes through. So mapping the container space and helping you kind of combat image sprawl, so to speak, and understand kind of across a bunch of different images what's going on, right? What similar packages, should you be pulling packages into your upstream image, stuff like that. So it's
Awesome.
really container driven.
Thank you so much, Zach, for your
Thanks, guys.
time.
Appreciate
And
it.
once you put your contact info in, I'm sure there will be people reaching out from the agenda notes.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, everybody.
Cool. So I did say we have a relatively light agenda today, which is one of the reasons that Zach got some extra time without me being too terribly invasive there. But we do have 2 SIG reports scheduled up. So Michael, sitting here next to me, is going to talk about SIG-Storage and what has been going on in that special interest group and what will be going on in that special interest group.
Okay.
Your camera is there.
Oh, hello, camera. So right now there are several things going on in the SIG. One of them is that there's a lot of open bugs in the 1.3 release due to the fact that we had a lot of churn in the storage stack and the mounting and unmounting path. In, I think, 1.3.4, we should have a lot of these being addressed. That release will be coming out. I think we're going to try to cut it today or early next week. The community overall is very interested in focusing on and ramping up our testing in general and making the system a lot more robust. And to discuss that, we're going to, well, and in light of that and other things, we're going to be having a face-to-face storage SIG in the second week of August. A bunch of people from all over the community, Red Hat, Cluster HQ, CoreOS, we're all going to be meeting in San Jose. I think what was the site again? Do you know, Sarah? Diamantic or
Diamante.
Diamante, I believe, in their office. And the agenda is online. If you go take a look at the Storage SIG's email archives, and you can see what we're going to be talking about. We're also dealing with dynamic claim provisioning this cycle, and there's been a lot of debate in the SIG right now about getting that done and trying to get that done in time and what the design of that will look like. In addition, there's a ton of sort of how are we going to have dynamic plugins interact with the storage stack today. We have many different approaches, and different companies are all sort of with their own views of what the right thing to do are. And we're trying to balance that out, and that's, I think, one of the next big topics for debate. Finally, you know, we're sort of beginning to really staff up and organize a lot of the, like I said, the sort of testing and confidence in how things are going and how we can automate what we're doing both in and out of the normal Google pre-submit, submit queue infrastructure. And a lot of companies are beginning to volunteer their own resources because with storage, you have all of these large dependencies and having, you know, big pieces of iron that you want to test your systems against. Things like, you know, EMC devices or S3 systems or NetApp filers. And people are beginning to sort of pony up and talk about that. Other than that, I don't know if there's anything else going on except there's just a large effort right now in stabilizing the big cleanup that we did in 1.3. Finally, the way we did the 1.3 work, the Red Hat team and the Google team ended up checking in a bunch of code past code freeze time. This was a calculated decision, but it was also a little bit opaque. And I think there were things that we could have done to improve the blowback from the decision. And right now, Brad Childs and I are drafting a postmortem that will be getting feedback from the people who were involved. I actually came into this midstream of the event, and we are going back and forth on that. I'm hoping to have that ready to release, you know, by the end of the month, by the end of like middle of August. You know, right now we're just going back and trying to figure out all of the details.
Excellent.
Are those comments about the testing blowback specific to storage, or were you kind of wandering generally into SIG testing territory there?
I think, as I understand things, and remember I'm new, so I probably am misunderstanding something. I'll use that excuse as long as I can. But as I understand, SIG testing is a lot more about sort of the infrastructure of testing overall. What I'm talking to people in the SIG storage team about, and what they're also interested in, Aaron Boyd especially has been highlighting this, is that there's a lot of, you know, it's not so much the test infrastructure as we need to write more tests. We need to exercise what we're doing. Right now, some of the data integrity tests we have, they do things like we write 30 bytes into a volume, close the volume, open it up, and then see if those 30 bytes are there. I don't think a lot of customers are only writing 30 bytes into their volumes. We should probably be understanding the use cases of our customers more deeply and building up even more testing than what we have already in, you know, exercising those paths. from what I've gathered, and again, remember, I've come in late, the situation has really improved a lot from the 1.2 timeframe, but there's a lot more work to be done. And it looks like we're, beginning to bear more effort and staffing on it. This isn't just a Google thing. I think this is across the SIG.
Right. Well, I guess I'd encourage you to, if you're talking about sort of general testing things, please touch base in with the testing SIG. I certainly understand specific test case enhancement things that are specific to the SIG's area probably shouldn't be going there. But it sounded like there were some community process communication things going on in your discussion there that it would be good to.
Right. Yeah. If that happens, I'll definitely do that. And it's possible that we'll end up asking for things from that, SIG and just in infrastructure and communication. But right now, I don't think that's where we're at. My impression is that there's actually a pretty rich environment to do what we need to do. We just need to start utilizing that environment and making progress.
Quick question on the face-to-face in San Jose. Is that like a reservations required kind of thing, or can people just show up?
I don't know. That's a good question. So far, yeah.
So there was an email this morning asking for people to RSVP on the doc that is starting to track the agenda. So this was all happening on the SIG-Storage mailing list. So simply for the facilities preparation kind of thing, if you can RSVP, that would be great, but it is not an invite-only sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah,
Awesome.
This is not being intended as sort of a closed room SIG-Storage event, but at the same point, I expect if you're not really focused on storage type of conversations, it probably isn't going to be the most useful. And please be aware, like I would hate for a really cool networking conversation to erupt in this forum, because you're probably not going to have all of the people that we need to have involved, and we have a lot of things to focus on in the storage if you take a look at the agenda. So be respectful of the agenda is mostly it, but people should be welcome. I'm not really aware of how big the facility space is. And so, yeah, I guess not enough thought has really been given to that, but I would hate to make this an invite only sort of event. And that's not the intent.
If for some reason, I'll just make the offer here. If for some reason you blow the space out, I'm sure we have enormous facilities in San Jose. I'm sure I could arrange for Samsung to host as an alternative.
Okay.
Oh, hey, yeah, sorry. This is Bob Wise from Samsung.
Oh, cool. Thanks. I apologize for not recognizing your voice immediately. Like I said, I'm new.
And he's going
maybe I should have gone off camera and said, hi, nice to meet you. So there you go. Anyway.
Awesome. All right. Any other people who have questions about SIG-Storage or crossover work that might be interesting to SIG-Storage, or things that you want to know if it's going to be discussed anytime soon, so that Michael might be able to answer that?
This isn't SIG-Storage related directly, but Michael said at the beginning that we'd be cutting a 134 this week. I'm just looking at the cherry pick dashboard, and there are 26 PRs proposed to be cherry picked. I think Fabio's been going through and pinging folks, asking them to send cherry pick pull requests. And I think a lot of people haven't done so yet. So if you have a PR that you sent out that's been marked as cherry pick candidate, please go through and send a pull request onto the 1.3 release branch so that we can get everything in for the 1.3.4 release. We want to make sure that all the fixes that people think need to be in the release branch actually make it into the release branch.
And Robert, by the way, did a really, he was sort of managing this release for a while, and he a bunch of people asked him, and he did a message to the Kubernetes dev list that sort of explained why we've had like 3 quick releases of 1.3. We found like 1 or 2. First, there was a security issue, and then we found 2 pretty high impact bugs. So in my mind, 1.3.4 is kind of one of the big roll up releases for 1.3 for a lot of bug fixes, not just storage related. But there are some things with secrets and the way that we do mounts. We accidentally did them in serial as opposed to parallel. So 1.3.4 should be addressing a lot of those concerns.
Right, and to make 1.3.4 actually a good roll-up release, we do want to get all of these cherry picks in. Like, it's real easy for me to go and like poke Googlers and make sure that the Google cherry picks get in. For people that don't work at Google, like we can poke PRs, but we really want people to sort of proactively start sending those cherry pick PRs.
Awesome, thank you. And I put that into the notes, though, Robert. If you have anything more specific or I misspoke in the notes, please feel free to update that.
Sure, I'll take a look.
All right, so we had another SIG report. If there's nothing else on SIG-Storage. Sounds like no, or you're on mute. SIG-Networking was the other big agenda item for today. So I put Tim on the spot this morning, even though he's been out a bunch. So it will be forward-looking.
Hey, everybody. So the SIG-Network took a little bit of a summer vacation along with me, and we haven't met in about a month. But we are going to meet this afternoon, and the topics on the agenda for this afternoon include the extension of the new network policy object, which is new in 1.3, extending that to include egress policies. At least that is the intention. There's a bunch of proposals open for how to do that. There's also a topic about an idea called node local services, which I honestly have not had a chance to look at the pull request yet, but the basic idea has come up many times with people who have some agent that runs on their machine, and then they want the pods in that machine to find that particular instance of the agent, but we don't want to share the machine's IP address because that's too high coupling. So we're trying to work out a good pattern for that. And then the other hot topic that is going to be a long topic of discussion, I suspect, is multi-tenancy, multi-network, that level of problem. There are a lot of people out there who are trying to work on solutions that involve running Coke and Pepsi on the same cluster and making sure that Coke's work can't talk to Pepsi's servers. Coke and Pepsi here are hypothetical, of course, but this is a really big topic with a lot of facets. Networking is just one of them. I think networking is one of the first ones that we need to handle. So we're starting here. This is not SIG multi-tenant. There is no SIG multi-tenant. Please don't start one. But it's going to hopefully start the conversation. So these are some of the things that we're working on right now. That said, as the 1.4 cycle draws just past the halfway mark, I guess, we're looking to see what we can practically achieve in the 1.4 cycle and what we can line up for the 1.5 cycle.
So where are you looking for input? Do you know at this point, or?
We're still mostly looking to hear use cases. People who have played with the network policy stuff. It's in beta in 1.3. I'm reluctant to move it to GA until we get some sort of positive acknowledgement that it's useful for people. Other than the vendors who've all implemented it. The multi-tenancy stuff is a very hard problem. So if you feel like you're in a situation where multi-tenancy would benefit you, you may want to join in some of the conversations. So I think those are the biggest bits of feedback that I'm looking for from folks. That and what else is hot that we're missing. There's a million things to do in networking.
Right, and I'll mention that I believe all of the special interest group mailing lists can be addressed publicly now. So if you want to cross-post, please don't, but do. No, if it's important, you should be able to cross-post across multiple special interest groups, and you don't have, or you don't have to be a member if you want to raise something to one of the special interest groups right now. So that should also allow more cross-pollination more easily, without flooding everyone's inbox full of all the mail, because we know that's a challenge.
Totally.
Say that again?
Just agreement.
Oh, okay. Yes. Are there any other SIGs that want to give updates this week on what they're working on? No? Or you're on mute again? All right. It does seem like we have a light participation in light week agenda-wise this week. It is summer vacation. Yes, to Tim's point, it is pretty much summer vacation. Plus, I know that Google is much of the Google team is in offsite this week, so we have lower representation there as well. So there were a few notices left, unless anyone has any open topics they want to discuss. You all want a half hour back.
Well, actually, this is Matt Farina. I was just going to jump in, and in SIG-Apps, one of the conversations that we had this week was the fact that secrets aren't encrypted at rest. And we were hoping or looking for people who might be interested in helping improve that. In the SIG-Apps survey, we found that a lot of people are using secrets, and they're probably under the impression that they really are stored and locked down in an encrypted manner. But the conversation came up that they weren't, and we got the context around it. But really trying to do something better with that is something a lot of us would like to see happen, and we're looking for people with interest and time. So my name is Matt Farina, and if you're interested, I will point you to the issues or try and get you linked into the right place.
Can you explain to me, just maybe in a few sentences, what problem does that solve if we don't have multi-tenancy right now?
If we, just storing secrets at rest is a requirement for a lot of enterprises. When you put your credentials in for something, you want them stored within your system in a truly locked down manner, not as plain text in etcd.
But is it really useful if, without some more generalized access control, anybody who's got kubectl can read it, or anybody who's got a pod can reference it?
Yeah, it's just one of those lockdown requirements. You want everything that's credential-wise locked down when it's stuck at rest. I mean, ideally, your passwords you don't store in plain text in there, but you'll store passwords to other systems. You're right, anybody who has access to kubectl, and it locks down, but if an intruder gets into your system and can poke around, or somebody who doesn't have authorization gets in, they've now got access to the back end, and you want to try to limit some of those fronts.
And just to be clear, I'm not arguing against better security. I'm just trying to figure out if closing the window while the door is wide open is actually a good use of time.
Prioritization.
My question actually is that, even if the window is closed and the door is wide open, unfortunately, the person buying the house, really cares about the windows being closed. Means we need to do this anyway, just to checkbox something for standards people. Is that the thing?
Well, that's part of it. And, what if somebody gets unauthorized access to the etcd machines who are on it, but they don't have access to everything else? It's also covering your attack basis. And so, sure, the door may be open, but maybe it is closed because, people don't have access controls to get into to do those things. And then when we get to multi-tenancy, this will become an even more important thing too.
Yeah,
so
I definitely agree with multi-tenancy. This is a big deal. Without it, I admit I guess I'm curious to know more. But that said, I also understand that if there's a standard and a checkbox that needs to be made for someone to feel comfortable buying the product, or not buying, but getting involved in the product, then that is also a separate issue too. I get that.
I'll ask a question then. Sounds like you have a kind of prioritized list of things that you think would be better addressed. If there's an alternative proposal for priorities, then by all means, let's figure out how to get the community rallied around it. Otherwise, I'm not sure why we would put off hygiene efforts across and along the project's evolution until a whole bunch of other things are done. I think we're headed towards a security waterfall.
Nobody's proposing putting it off if people want to work on it. This is the beauty of open source. If it's important to somebody, they can work on it. My question is really, as a non-security expert, if those people have security backgrounds who are interested in this, are there other things that we can do that would have more impact in the medium term?
And I've got sort of two thoughts here too, unfortunately. So one thing that people may not know, because I've not done a good job publicizing this, is evidently I'm also responsible, at least on the Google side, of keeping track of a lot of the security topics that are involved in Kubernetes. And I'm currently looking for people to hire to help us do that. But given that, I'm just interested in what problems we're trying to solve when people bring up security features. And finally, if someone thinks this is important and wants to work on it, then we should definitely do it. I just wanted to know more about what what we're trying to fix.
Awesome. So the other thing I'll mention about SIG-Apps in the short term is I have asked Prashant to talk about the future of PetSet next week here in this meeting, and to also start looking at doing a lot of that work in conjunction with SIG-Apps, as well as the what is the workloads? What are we calling that?
I think it's just called workloads.
Okay, as well as the workloads work. So the common workloads where, everybody wants to be able to use this piece of software on Kubernetes. So also having that work start being surfaced more in SIG-Apps. We're trying to tie more and more of these efforts to special interest groups, and then have the special interest groups bubble up the summaries into this meeting on a consistent and rolling basis, so that where we need it, we can get cross-pollination, and where we want it, we can dive in more deeply in the special interest groups.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Any other SIGs? Nope. Fantastic. All right. Well, then 2 quick notices, and we will get 15 minutes of our lives back. Ihor, you had one about the 1.4 features.
Yeah, I have. We have defined the features that are going to be added to 1.4 release. The link to our GitHub or to our GitHub features repo to the meeting notes, and you may review them and possibly join some conversations if you're interested in some of them. And we're expecting to finalize the coding stage in 3 weeks. So the soft code release will happen in 3 weeks. After that, we'll start the bug fixing stage. So yeah, and I'm expecting to prepare the spreadsheet as I have prepared for 1.3 when there was a 1.3 release scope. So I'm expecting to prepare a similar spreadsheet for 1.4 for the next weekly meeting, and possibly we may discuss that during the next meeting with more details. That's all from me.
Excellent. And I want to do one clarification in that. So this list of 1.4 features is 1.4 features we're tracking for 1.4.
Yes.
It is not 1.4 features that are blocking 1.4.
No, that are features that we are tracking for 1.4.
Excellent. So things that we expect to come in, but they are not a blocking list at this point. We are much closer to a model of time-based releases with occasional exception processing where we need it, as opposed to a feature-based release list.
Yeah, so at the current moment, again, so we have the coding stage, we are not having the final polishing stage. So at the current moment, we're only tracking the features and expecting the most of them to be ready and to be prepared to be added soon to 1.4 release when it will happen.
Excellent. Thank you, Ihor. And then the last note that I had is the CLA change is coming. So as part of moving Kubernetes to the Cloud Native Compute Foundation, we are also moving out of the Google CLA and moving to the Cloud Native Compute CLA. I am going to be reaching out to large companies who have generally had a corporate CLA signing in the next week or several, and getting started that legal process. So we're going to try very hard to not cut over any of the repos until we get many of the large corporate CLAs signed, but we need to get this moving. We're also going to be moving the repos one by one inside Kubernetes, as opposed to the whole of the Kubernetes organization, because we have to do some testing before we cut over the whole org. So keep an eye out for CLA changes. You may be asked to sign again. If you are, please do. If you can sign as an individual, please reach out to me if there are corporate issues, and I am happy to help facilitate on that. So the change is coming. There will be more info and an actual plan put forward to the mailing list, and probably again on this meeting when we have the actual plans. We're still in the testing phase on this, but I will start reaching out to the corporate contributors with the CLA so that we can start the legal grinding ahead of the cutover. Any questions on that? Wow, Justin, I had no idea you were so excited about CLAs. He's got a whoop, whoop.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm excited that you're on top of this.
It is Brian and me who have been doing a lot of this, so Brian Grant is also to be thanked for this.
He's not in the room. I give you full credit.
Fantastic. I'll take full credit after having given some of it away. All right. Anything else from anyone else? Or do we get 14 minutes of our lives back? 14 minutes. All right. Have a great Thursday, and I will see you all next week.
Okay, bye.